Hi everybody, my name's Kay. You're watching Amidst the Gray. And today, we're going to get up close and personal with the pages in a viewer requested video for how I work with the court cards. Let's do it. My son is currently in the hardware store buying me an appliance bowl for my stove because it burned out and I love my stove light. So he volunteered to go in and pick that up for me, and an oil filter for my car as well. So he's off doing that at the moment. So I thought, well, I might as well film an intro for this video about working with the court cards, which I intend to make its own little series. I'm going to start with the pages, then do the knights, then the queens, and then the kings. And what I thought I would do is just bring out some examples of each from the decks in my library and just kind of break down some of the components that are featured in each one and how I might go about reading those. This is a viewer requested video. Someone in a comment in my That 9 card spread video that I did asked me if I would please do a video about working with the courts, just because I had a lot of court cards present in that reading and I broke them down pretty intricately. The courts, I think, are some of those cards that when someone is first getting acquainted with tarot as a system can be a bit of a struggle. And I personally didn't really have that struggle experience with the courts. I think it had a lot of that has to do with how I read them, and it was just kind of natural for me. I had a thing with like just the numbered minors kind of as a whole more than I did with the court cards. But I can understand how courts would be kind of tricky, just because depending on the situation and the context of the reading, they could be kind of tricky to navigate as far as, well, how do I interpret this card in relation to this bit of context? So I absolutely understand why courts can be so tricky for so many people. Any decks or sources that I mention or feature, I will do my best to link in the description box to the best of my ability. So if you're interested in what I present further, you can go check that out. Okay, let's look at some pages.
I feel that first thing I should do is give a little bit of a, I suppose, disclaimer that I am not a tarot teacher. I've never taken a tarot class, and I currently only read for myself. So my approach that I'm going to map out for you in this video and the subsequent videos it's purely based in my own experience, resources that I've read on my own, and kind of how I've taken that in and assimilated it for myself. In addition to that little disclaimer, I also still currently have a bit of a post-nasal drip situation happening at the moment. That's just kind of lingering, so my voice is a little bit more croaky than it typically is. So just putting that out there. Okay, so I'll explain what I've done here. I've taken 3 decks from my library that I feel will best represent how I kind of want to put this information forward. So the top row is my Centennial RWS. The middle row is the Wayhome Tarot. And the bottom row is the Elemental Power Tarot. I chose these because, for one, the RWS is highly recognizable. The images are well known. And the Wayhome Tarot and the Elemental Power Tarot both feature an aspect of the elemental representation and the elemental associations for how I read the cards. reading by the elements for the quartz is a major part in how I interpret these energies. And I thought it would be beneficial to have sort of an elemental representation along with human figures, as we see in the Wayhome Tarot, as well as elemental representations that are purely symbolic, which is what we see on the bottom in the Elemental Power Tarot. In the vertical column to the left, you will see the Page of Swords from each deck, the next column over the Page of Wands, column after that, the Page of Cups, and the final column on the right, the Page of Coins or Pentacles. I liked the idea of kind of mapping them out this way visually, just so you can kind of see for yourself sort of how the energy kind of looks, both within the same deck and within the different decks. So if you look at the Page of Swords on the left, you can kind of see what is maybe similar between the three cards. And you can also see the Page of Swords with the other pages in its same deck. So it's just a way of kind of putting that together visually, so we can get an idea sort of how that energy might be flowing. With that context, I'll now go into a bit how I approach the quartz in general in a reading, and then we'll go a bit deeper with the pages specifically. In my That 9 Card Spread video that I put out in December, I think it was, I went into a bit of detail regarding my interpretation of the quartz, simply because I received 3 out of the 4 pages in that reading. And so I related my interpretation to what I was seeing in that reading. In that reading, I went into a bit about how I see court cards, all the court cards in general, as behavior. The quartz are embodied behavior. Whether that is my behavior or the behavior of someone else is highly dependent on the context of the reading. And since I only read for myself, intuitively, I get a pretty good grasp fairly quickly of which is which. And oftentimes it does refer to me and my own behavior, particularly if it's a position that relates to the present moment, or if it is related to me specifically. If it's a position that is a who can help me with this or something like that, and a court shows up, for me, that's a pretty good indicator that another person could be helpful in your situation. I've seen a lot on YouTube and online about connecting the quartz with the MBTI personality types, which for me is interesting just because that is a direct correlation with relating the energies of the quartz with different cognitive combinations of persona. Many different resources and like big guidebooks out there will have a section for the quartz, interpreting them in something like a situation, which is a completely valid way to read if that resonates with you. But for me personally, even if I get a quart in a position referring to a situation, I will almost always relate it back somehow to a person that is in that situation or context. I always bring it back to behavior. The long story short is when a court card shows up in a reading I'm doing for myself, I always ask the question, is it me or is it someone else? And intuitively, I almost instantly always know the answer. Now that I've touched on the persona piece, I will bring in the elemental component as an added layer of looking at energy. As far as elemental associations are concerned, there are a lot of different approaches that are out there as far as elements you can associate with each rank in the court cards. For me, personally, I associate the pages with the element of earth. All of the pages have a sub-element for me, which is earth, regardless of their suit. I have seen a couple approaches that have put the pages as air, but that just didn't resonate with me. Pages as earth makes sense to me. Pages for me take the energy of the ace, that newness, that origin, and they begin to give it form. They ground that energy. Pages are often associated with newness and beginnings and maybe slightly unrefined, more immature energy. And in order for us to progress, if we are in that energy, it's vitally important that we have a firm footing, that we are grounded so that we can progress in that energy, refine it, and move it forward. Pages are also often associated with students or the beginner mindset or a novice or a learner or an apprentice, an energy that is just starting in something new. And any of us can have any of these energies at any time in our lives. Another important thing to note is that I do not attach age or gender to my court cards because any of these energies can apply to anyone at any time. When I was first learning tarot and I came across this concept of court cards being court card ranks being associated with elements, that idea just kind of thrilled me. But a lot of the Golden Dawn based sources that I was reading, the element assigned to each, well, that's not fair. The element assigned to usually 2 out of the 4 ranks didn't resonate with me. It just didn't feel like how I would interpret it. And then later on, I happened to get the book, The Marseille Tarot Revealed by Johan Bendov, which is a Marseille, essentially, a big Marseille guidebook. And in this book, there was a section on the 4 ranks. And he talked a bit about the elements, and I was intrigued, and so I read on. Later on, I learned that these associations are connected to the body parts and postures of the figures in the cards, which is a very important interpretation point for Marseille. On page 242 of the 2017 printing of this book, there is a paragraph at the bottom that reads, "The symmetry of the 4x4 table makes it possible to see a correspondence between the ranks and the suits. The 4 pages are standing on solid ground, which links them to the suit of coins. The knights mounted on horses express dynamism and movement typical of the wand suit. Also, the horse touching their pelvic area can represent the animal forces of desire. The original form of wands as polo sticks in the Mamluk playing cards can also be linked to the horse riding polo players. The female figures in the queen cards express the domain of emotion represented by the suit of cups. And finally, the king's domination, resolution, and mature wisdom correspond to the combative, decisive, and intellectual suit of swords." In that same book by Bendov, on page 249, there is a paragraph that reads, "A page card may represent a person acting in a new and unknown field. At this stage, he still lacks proficiency and has little control over his environment. Therefore, he is unsure in his actions and decisions. His status as page may also indicate that he is still dependent on others better positioned than him. On the positive side, he may represent a fresh approach, someone ready to learn and improve, and can expect help from others as well as forbearance for his beginner's mistakes. A page card may also represent a person who is young in age or attitude, or signal a lack of maturity and responsibility." It was after I read those excerpts of Bendov's book concerning the courts and the elements that my associations were pretty much solidified, because the approach that he had mapped out completely resonated with me, and I've used it ever since. In the book WTF is Tarot and How Do I Do It by Bakara Whitner, which is associated with the Wayhome Tarot, the deck in the middle there, on page 103 at the very bottom, a little paragraph representing the daughters, which is the pages, says, "New situations, ventures, or creative outlets. The naive version of a suit's energy. Youngest of the court cards and possesses a youthful quality, either literally or being green in an aspect of life. Earth element, connected to the Fool, the Ace cards, and the 2 cards." In the Wayhome Tarot, the courts are laid out in a family unit kind of setup with daughters, sons, mothers, and fathers, but once again, I don't associate gender with my courts. In the book Tarot, Your Personal Guide by Stephen Bright, pages are noted as the youngest member of the court. They are the students of the tarot, open to learning new things within their world. They can bring messages into a reading. The Page of Cups, and as an example, might bring messages of an emotional nature. That description pays homage to more traditional descriptors of pages being messengers. I often don't see that, but that, again, context is important in the reading. And now we'll move into the suit-specific aspect of the pages. So I have laid out for you each of the Page of Swords cards from each of the 3 decks. On the left, once again, is the Centennial RWS. In the middle is the Wayhome Tarot. And on the right is the Elemental Power Tarot. In the RWS, if you look at all the pages together, like I had them before, they are all standing on the earth. Their feet are on the ground. They have somewhat planted themselves. In the case of the Page of Swords, if you look at what would be the figure's right heel, it looks like it is elevated slightly, which to me has always suggested a little bit of not being completely there yet, like kind of almost in a hurry. And you can also see the ground as well as the clouds. So that earth of air element, the Page of Swords or could also be the Page of Air, but that earth aspect is very much present in the ground that the figure is standing on. If we take a look at the Daughter of Swords, the Page of Swords in the Wayhome Tarot, the card in the middle, you see a figure with the hand or the finger on the chin, indicating a level of potential wonder or curiosity, which is a word I often associate with all of the pages, but particularly the Page of Swords, because the swords is the suit of the mind, of the intellect, of communication. In addition to the finger on the chin, if you notice on the inside of the figure, there are snowflakes. Snow it's not a solid form of precipitation. It's more of like a semi-solid, but that solidity, that semi-solidity to me still suggests an aspect of earth being in that forming of a semi-solid energy. Again, not ice, not completely solid like ice would be, but exploring what it would be like to have that energy. In the Elemental Power Tarot, all of the pages are represented by that wreath in the center. And if you look closely, you know it's the suit of swords because you have the elemental symbol of air on the top left corner, and then you have the sword on the top right corner. And then you see the clouds and sky in the background. But if you look at the bottom, there is a supporting energy of mountains and earth. So looking at this, you know that this is the earth of air, the Page of Swords. The wreath itself is also a very earthy symbol. Energetically speaking, the Page of Swords represents an individual that is giving form to a new idea or a new communication or anything new in the realm of the mental plane. The Page of Swords is also my significator for my own sun. He is a Gemini sun and Mercury. I also associate the Page of Swords with learning something new, learning anything new. I know learning and studying is often associated with the Page of Coins or Pentacles, but for me, learning is very much a mental process, and I often associate that more with Page of Swords versus Page of Coins. If a Page of Swords shows up in my reading, I examine the question, how do I need to give an idea form? Where do I need to learn something new, have an open mind, a curious mind, a beginner mind? Or how does another person's embodying these characteristics play a part if it's related to another person? Because I associate this card with my sun, also, depending on the context, I might bring that interpretation into the reading as well. Now we'll move on to the Page of Wands. The Page of Wands is what I refer to as the Spitfire of the tarot. It's that fiery energy, but it is unrefined and somewhat immature fiery energy. I often think of my students and my colleagues, for that matter, who are these natural bundles of energy and they can't sit still. To me, that's very much Page of Wands energy. It's naturally energetic and vibrant and wants to go explore everything. The Page of Wands for me can often be a young or young at heart artist or creative that is maybe just discovering their talent or their interest for the first time, and they are diving in head first and just immersing themselves at a sensory level in the experience. Remember, pages for me are earth, so there's always going to be this physicality and sensory oriented energy that incorporates itself in with that fiery energy. The energy of Page of Wands also for me wants to have the experience for experience's sake. It doesn't really matter whether or not the end result manifests. It's the process that is important. It's the act of engaging with the experience that in the end is probably more important than the outcome. There also can be easily inspired or not, depending on the context of the reading. If we look at the RWS, again, we see the figure with the feet on the ground. We see the pyramids and the kind of suggestion of desert and heat in the environment. And if we look at the page and the page's staff, the staff is taller than the page. So there's an aspirational quality here where this page is thinking, I'm not there yet, but I will be. If we move to the middle, the Daughter of Wands from the Wayhome Tarot, we can see there are these bursts of fireworks within the figure. So the positioning of the figure, the arm is behind the head, and the hand is touching the back of the neck. There's that skin to skin contact, that sensory physicality, but that energy of that initial explosion of creative energy that lies within that figure. I often associate Page of Wands with dancers due to the nature of the physicality of the earth and the creative passion of the fire element. If we look at the Elemental Power Tarot, again, we see the wreath, we see the element of fire in the left corner, we see the wand in the upper right corner, we see all that fire in the background, but again, the wreath and the supporting energy of those earthy peaks, both on the top and the bottom. So here we have the earth of fire. If the Page of Wands shows up in my reading, I will often ask myself the question how I can engage in a new creative activity. Or how can I work on honing a creative skill that I've already started engaging with? How can I engage my senses? How can I have a sensory experience in something creative? Or if it's another person involved, how is a person embodying that energy impacting me in whatever context or spread position the reading calls for? The Page of Wands might also be a person that enjoys cooking due to the sensory nature of the food and drink and the heat aspect of the cooking process. So I've seen people I know who are cooks or chefs, I've seen them kind of pop up here and there in readings that I've done for myself when the Page of Wands comes up. Again, context is very important in these interpretations. Now we'll move to the Page of Cups. For me in the tarot, as far as the court cards are concerned, there are three court cards that for me are often portrayed a little one-sided when, in my personal opinion, and there's just so much more depth than these energies are often given credit for. One is the Knight of Wands. The second is the Queen of Swords, And the third is this card, the Page of Cups. I feel the Page of Cups is often looked upon as this sort of flighty, naive, maybe over emotional energy. And depending on the context, that can be the case. But if we flip that around and examine it from the other side, the Page of Cups, the earth of water, in this energy, an individual is giving form to a feeling or to an emotion. It can take a lot of courage to acknowledge a feeling and begin to make it part of your physical reality. It's very much a card of vulnerability. And I mentioned in my 9-card spread video that vulnerability is hard. It can be very, very hard for people to show their vulnerable side because vulnerability is often equated with weakness. And in, a lot of aspects of society, being weak is bad. In my opinion, if more individuals in this world had the capacity to embody healthy Page of Cups energy, I really feel this world would be a lot better place. Okay, let's take a look at the RWS Page of Cups that we all know fairly well. Again, feet on the ground. You see the earth element present there. And you also see the water of the main element representing the cup suit come into play there. And then you see the cup with the little fish popping out. And that fish is very kind of dreamy type energy. That's another thing that Page of Cups is often associated with is daydreaming. And daydreaming is often portrayed as something that is unproductive, inefficient, and as a whole negative. When in reality, and there's studies that back up that healthy amounts of daydreaming can actually be very, very good for the brain. I sometimes also see the fish as a representation of the energy of vulnerability, because if you think about fish as a whole, fish are very vulnerable creatures. They just are. It's the nature of how they're made and their environment. And you have this little fish poking out of this vessel. So it's almost like you're looking your vulnerability in the face and you're kind of feeling your way around, how do I handle this and move forward? If we look at the Daughter of Cups from the Wayhome Tarot in the middle, if you think back to the previous two from this deck, there's kind of a stark contrast here where the other two were more had maybe some sharper edges and more kind of angular movement. There's a softness here. There's a suppleness. The flower is a representation for me of that earth element. That stem is rooted. It's going along down the spinal column and into the pelvic area. It's giving form to that flower. And for me, the water element shows up in the color pink, because pink is very much a heart-centered color that is often associated with love and emotion. If we look at the Page of Cups on the right from the Elemental Power Tarot, we see that wreath again, the symbolic representation of the pages in this deck. We see this swirling, almost whirlpool kind of energy in the water. But there is that earthiness that's kind of holding it in place, sort of containing it. And in the upper left, we have the symbol for water. And in the upper right, we have the symbol for the cup. So it's all this emotion that's just swirling around. But there is a bit of grounding present from that earth energy, both from the wreath and that earth symbolism on the bottom there. Page of Cups shows up in my reading. A question I almost immediately ask is where or how should or could I be more vulnerable? Would being more vulnerable be beneficial to me? Would being vulnerable be a hindrance to me? Where does vulnerability play a part in my behavior or not, depending on the context of the reading? If I feel it's related to another person, it could be who is maybe trying to be vulnerable around me and express feelings, and maybe I'm not seeing it, and I need to maybe pay closer attention to see if that's meaningful. Page of Cups for me can also be intuition by means of the senses. So there's that sensory aspect of the earth and that intuitive kind of dreamy feeling of water. And last but certainly not least, we come to one of my favorite cards in the entirety of the tarot, and that is the Page of Coins, or Pentacles. I have a student at school who likes to garden and be in the mud and get her hands dirty, and I always think of Page of Pentacles when I encounter a person that sort of has that energy. If we look at the RWS Page of Pentacles, we see the feet on the ground again with trees in the background, and since coins are earth, this is the earthiest of the earth cards. This is the earth of earth. And if we look at the colors of the clothing, they're that very natural, more earth toned colors. There's also that aspirational quality as well of the page sort of almost looking up at that pentacle, because the pentacle is slightly elevated from the natural gaze of the eye. So it's there's this I'm not there yet, but I'll get there kind of energy, just kind of imagining maybe what could come in the future if this new cycle is entered into appropriately and the correct steps are taken. I consider my personal significator to be the Queen of Cups, but honestly, I identify so closely with the Page of Pentacles. I just feel like I have embodied that energy so much in my lifetime. And I love this Daughter of Pentacles card from the Wayhome Tarot. Look at the kneeling position. Not only are the feet on the ground, but so are the knees. The entire lower body is grounded in that earth. And it's so, that card is just so earthy to me. The hand is held out. There's new growth taking place where the figure is rooted. On the right, we have the Elemental Power Tarot. And if you look at this card, you see the earth element symbol in the upper left. You see the coin in the upper right. You see the wreath in the middle, but then look at the background. Remember, this is the earth of earth, and this deck depicts the same elemental symbolic representations and associations that I personally use. So remember, from this perspective, the Page of Coins is the earthiest of earth energy, and look at all of that brown. Look at all of the kind of the gnarls and the roots, and there are even little bird skulls. There's at least one in there. There's so much earthiness to this card. When the Page of Coins shows up in a reading for me, I often will consider the question, where or how can I explore or be curious about my physical environment? How can I engage with my physical environment in a way that is appropriate and relevant to the context? Or in the case of someone else, how can I maybe assist someone in doing that? Or maybe how can they help me kind of be more centered in this energy? Page of Coins is a very grounded energy. I've had this card come up in readings a few times where the solution for me was just to embody this energy. What would Page of Coins do? Maybe go outside and stand barefoot in the grass. Just go and reroot myself. Just embody that earthy behavior. I think that's all I have to say, at least for now, about the pages. Once again, I do intend on making this its own little series, so I will do a video similar to this for the knights, one for the queens, one for the kings, and then maybe after I do all four, maybe I'll do a reading that involves maybe purposefully selecting court cards to represent certain positions, just to see what happens and what shows up. That might be kind of fun. So this has been kind of a quick semi-chaotic little crash course regarding how I approach court cards, or how I might approach court cards in a reading, and how I view them energetically, both from a behavioral standpoint and an elemental standpoint. Until my next video, take care and be well.